documenting the front lines of the AI revolution, the AI Rebels podcast.
All right, welcome everybody to another episode of the AI Rebels podcast. Today we have Justin from Somewhere Systems with us. They are an engineer, AI engineer, audio engineer, engineer of many things.
Jack
Justin,
of all engineers.
Yeah,
Awesome.
master of all.
I appreciate that. It's like very.
Tell us a little
very
how'd you get into tech to kind of start with?
So I grew up in like a really not tech dense area. Like I didn't know what Y Combinator was until I was like 21 or 22, right? I grew up like in a city outside of Orlando, Florida, which is sort of like in this like remote, indiscriminate area between like where Disney is and where like Central Florida like proper is. But I guess like just spending a lot of time on the computer. I was actually I was like reading this study earlier about how the first like games people play, determine their trajectory in life. Like there was a statistic like people who had played Super Mario Brothers had like a 49% higher chance of pursuing a plumbing career. People who had played The Sims had like a 3.2 times like the average like actual number of incidents of like becoming like urban planners. But like I spent like a lot of time when I was a kid like playing honestly like sandbox games. I was like a deep Gary Spot addict in middle school, and that I think like that and the amount of time that I spent just indoors and on the computer really shaped the amount of time that I was exposed eventually to things like computer programming and going and like getting a master's in engineering helped, I guess, to some extent.
I'd do it.
Yeah, right. So yeah, I mean, it was just like sort of the sum of the entire time that I eventually gravitated towards making software because the resources to do so were free. It was relatively easy to get into without like paying any money for anything. At least like until now, how it's done most of the time. Yeah, I guess that kind of is the full path of how I got here.
I love that. I'm glad your games contributed to you. I crushed it at GoldenEye, but that has not translated to me
Man,
doing
GoldenEye.
a whole lot related
Becoming
to that.
like a
We had some
international
excellent GoldenEye
spy.
games.
Yeah.
We would do
That's awesome.
GoldenEye tournaments, and Jake and I would just wash everybody else.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I didn't have a console until I was like, I don't know, maybe like my teenage years. I think like because it started for us in like our household with the GameCube, right? Like so like anything earlier than that, it had to be whatever was at a friend's house. Okay. But naturally there was always like a computer in the house, so I mean like that exposed me to games like RuneScape at like a pretty early age. So because it was just like what was available at the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That like shooters I didn't really get into until I was in like high school. By that point, it was just so common that it was just everybody had like a PS3 and a PC, so it was just like normal
Right.
normal adolescence.
Yeah. No, that makes sense.
And then
go ahead.
sorry, Jake, go ahead. I was just going to say, you've also had an interesting path into AI specifically. You went through audio engineering to start with. Was that before or after you went and got a master's?
So I had been engineering my own stuff since I was like in high school, right? So it was more of like a progression of an extension of that.
Mhm.
I got my master's in audio engineering, right? So it was like I kind of like self-learned up until that point. But I was also making primarily like the nexus of like how that turned into like a master's degree was more of just like I went to the master's degree because I thought it would make my music better, and they were like, "We're accepting you here because we think it'll make your music better."
Nice.
Ultimately, it would be like 6 months later, and I would have like quit making electronic music for the next like 4 years. So it was just
Okay.
it was just a natural effect of that.
Okay. Do you feel like the master's degree was worthwhile? Like, do you feel like it brought enough value for the time and everything you put
Yes.
into it?
Only because it was the mechanics of the master's degree that led to publishing research, which was the whole reason I came up to New York City in October 2019 and moved in with my girlfriend at the time, who's now my wife. So like that by itself was like, yeah, that made it.
Yeah.
I mean, like it
Worth it.
basically, it's setting off that whole chain of events that both created Somewhere Systems, and like my household is like that would probably be, that'd be the answer.
Yeah, yeah.
So tell us a little bit about Somewhere Systems. This seems like a natural segue since you mentioned it organically.
Yeah, so Somewhere Systems is like a 7-year-old company that was originally birthed because of my need for like a single prop LLC to have write off expenses for trying to do more or less like creative spec work for people. So like the first few years that I was doing it, it started being, how I was taking payments doing audio engineering, and I was
Hmm.
making like there was like a year where I was like totally dependent on my parents and like making like I think like $5,000 a year in income. And like it wasn't until I had moved up to New York City that I had escaped like geekdom, at least in terms of like my like financial independence, right? And that was only made possible, I think, through the maturation of Somewhere Systems from something that was just doing audio engineering to very rapidly, thanks to somebody apart that was like an excellent, like talented business manager that I had outsourced to and given like a gross share of like all the income that we had made. That was a function of like Somewhere Systems maturing, I think, into a company that was then doing multimedia. So we started with doing things like we had taken and rescued a commercial for like a law firm and shipped it to NBC Universal, and it played on like the Golf Channel with like zero experience, just reading spec sheets and like following brand guidelines that they sent us in a PDF packet. Yeah, like from my parents' house, because I was like trying to make it out of the reverse like trap of being at your parents' house.
Right.
Uh, so yeah, no, but like doing work like that, and then immediately upon coming to New York, pivoting to basically trying to solve like augmented reality filters for entertainment brands during like the very early, a couple months before the start of COVID. And then COVID hit, and then it just like made it like a feasible way to make enough income to where it was like operating very suddenly as like a real business. And we did that for about 2 years. So we shipped like about 110 different experiences to like a bunch of different, like all the major labels, a bunch of their derivatives, a bunch of independent artists like CD Baby, TuneCore, and then ended sometime in 2000. I want to say it was like 2021. Yeah, it was 2021, and it ended as we tapered off doing things like web design. We did Royksopp's website. We did a couple of websites for a couple other label artists, and then unfortunately at that point I got sick. I got hit with like an autoimmune disorder, right? So I tapered down like the work. I couldn't handle the stress of like dealing with like client like brand like activation work. So at the time we were doing brand activations, right, for like, you know, maybe 100, 110 artists. Got sick, I went to go work at the bank. After hours, when I was not working at the bank, I would go and research essentially ways to use like, it was early explorations that people were doing of like using GPT-3 and like context injection to
Yeah.
use documentation to do like very early code gen. Yeah, and I found that it was possible with like few shot prompting to give the system prompt of like the chat GPT-3 or not chat GPT-3, just GPT-3 completions endpoint, right? And just context injecting them and like learning how to generate code was just like, it was like a night and day moment for me, right? And then
Yeah,
after
I'm
some
sure.
time of doing this, I quit the bank and I went to go work on call center software. But the benefit of that was it was like one of the first like early implementations of a voice agent, right? Like a real time one. And it was like constantly having to update the architecture of everything as like this market like rapidly matured.
Yeah.
And just like betting on the side of like latency that it would like get under 890 milliseconds and like actually sound human when talking to it.
It's so funny that you mentioned the call center software because I think you're at least the second person we've had on here who had the exact same path of like working for a bank. In this case, they were working for Capital One, and then they got put onto like the phone agent team right around the same time frame.
That's like scary to think that a company like Capital One has an internal like AI phone team. That sounds like
yeah.
the pressure of having to do that. I
Yeah.
feel like in that environment would be
Yeah,
It
don't
would be
want to
crazy.
don't want to blow that. So you mentioned it was like a night and day moment for you. At what was the most significant? Let me back up. Was there a task or something you accomplished with GPT-3 that was kind of that exact moment where you're like, this is going to be the future?
well, it felt like it made the use of documentation, like seeing like your answers, like I knew that that was going to get better, and I think it was more exciting knowing that eventually something like a Claude like would exist, and it was like that was the start of that. Because
So you saw that coming. You kind of knew this is going to come.
I had toyed around with GPT-2 as well. That was what my friend Nick and I had used for the John Zanzibar videos.
Okay.
So yeah, we had experience with like fine-tuning models by that point. So it was exciting to see that it was like maybe models will kind of create this flywheel where they'll be able to write code for us. And what it was really helpful for was it transformed like the debugging process, like spot checking pieces of code that weren't working properly, and feeding errors as context into a completions endpoint to see if you could like trick or prompt engineer it into giving you like a coherent answer. That all was, I think, a big moment in time for me, because before that, like, you know, I had done scripting across a variety of languages, and I built some software in Unity before. But like, would I consider myself like a developer at that point, like, or like a software engineer? Likely not. Like, I did not understand anything about building like reliable or you know, fault tolerant systems until much later. It's kind of like, you know, playing the guitar, where it's like no matter how many years you have, there's always still something to improve upon, and you're never going to be very good at everything everywhere, because it's just like TMI for just a human. But
yeah. Okay, that's interesting.
So you have an interesting story about AI with regards to your autoimmune disease that I've always wanted to like ask you more about, because it was one of the first posts that I saw from you on Twitter, and I was like, oh, that's really interesting. Would you mind talking about that? I'm sure that you've told that story before, but I'd love to get it on our podcast.
No, yeah. So I was diagnosed with this disease called EGPA, or eosinophilic granulomatosis polyangiitis, or something like that. Which is basically used to be called a different disease. It used to be called Churg-Strauss, but they had to get rid of that because Strauss was like an active member of the Nazi Party, and nobody wanted like the Nazi allergies cancer. So like they were.
That sounds bad. That sounds real bad.
Yeah. So they changed it to EGPA, which wouldn't normally be a problem, but a lot of people in like lower healthcare access states, because a lower population means a lower incidence rate of this. And there's some like geographic factors that are strange. Like there's quite a lot of patients in southern Japan, but it might also be because getting more frequent blood work is sort of like a more core component of their healthcare system as compared to ours. So it might just be that people here getting it don't know what's wrong, and then just like either die, or it happens to old people or something. But yeah, so like COVID triggered this disease at some point in 2021. And for like a year, I was having to like navigate, you know, Florida's healthcare system, which was like outside of Mayo Clinic, like okay at dealing with stuff like this rare. And I would say okay because there was good advice, like, you know, we did meet with doctors that recommended biotherapies and whatnot, and eventually got like a hold on everything and like stabilized the entire situation, right? But finding that care, especially at the beginning when the system was so, I guess, like distant in terms of proximity of places to each other, it was difficult to find people that were familiar with the disease until we had gotten to Mayo Clinic, which exists, you know, in like a bunch of different states. So it's kind of neither here nor there. But during that time, what became important when it was like copays were too expensive and I couldn't afford to like go get blood work as often, learning like basically how to read my own you know, lab results for Quest diagnostics and stuff, that using that with GPT-4 as also a check to what doctors would tell you, because like occasionally like we got horrible advice, right? Like before it was known that I had EGPA, I met with one family doctor who like recommended that I just like take cough medicine, which was like
every morning, just a little shot.
no, yeah. But then at the same time, like first to prescribe Episode, which would have actually fixed the situation at an earlier point in time. But eventually, like learning to use GPT and GPT-4 specifically. Then I guess what was the second step to that was I wrote this repo and made like this Replit project as well, like back in I think like 2023 or 24, I forget what year. Called like I think the GPT Council or something. and it was essentially like a repo for calling multiple instances of GPT-4 and giving them like personas. And I would just go and get as much like information on my doctor as possible. And then like just plop it into GPT-4 as the system prompt, and then just like basically be like, you have the same exact position as my doctor. Here are your credentials. Like I didn't include like their names, like like non-public information.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would just have it simulate like a care team and like create like a summary of summaries, sort of aggregate of information, and feed it things like lab work as well. And I guess that was like the start to like earnest, I think, like actual agent design outside of like voice agent technology.
So then how did that contribute to you getting, was that linked? Is that where you found the answer? Is that what helped you figure out it was eGPA or?
It was primarily, I think, an idiot check, but like those in like the circumstance of eGPA, it's like that advice and like not understanding how to navigate parts of like the insurer like client like sort of relationship or like or subscriber relationship is that is like by itself made it possible for this to even like benefit me in a way that I'm not like fucked up by some virtue of someone's bad advice. Yeah.
Drink and cough medicine.
Oh, yeah. Right.
Sipping on that scissor.
No, yeah. The turning point in when I had recovered was when I had introduced GPT-4 and other models like into the appraisal of my care. Like especially when it
It's
came time
amazing.
to be like, well, it was like, uh, does this interact with my chemotherapy medication? And of course, checking this information, but over time, realizing that, especially when the smarter models came out, like 4.0 and Claude, Sonnet, this was like a transformational moment with good contextual information and building tools as well for things like retrieval. This was a really like watershed moment in being able to use models for things like healthcare. They've published like extensive research on this as well, where even like unfine-tuned GPT-4 models like outperform physicians at diagnosing the correct disease based on a list of symptoms.
So exciting. I mean, if you think of what healthcare is, like you go to a doctor because they've studied this, right? They've studied the patterns, they've studied the symptoms, patterns of these diseases. And so they know, if you go to a specialist who's dealt with lots of eGPA, which I'm sure is rare, but if you went to someone, they would say, okay, I've seen these patterns, these patterns I've seen over time. And that is like AI's bread and butter. Like it can go digest millions and millions of cases, boil it down for you and say, this is what I think it is. And so, yeah, this is one of the areas I'm most excited about with AI, I think, is just healthcare and the empowerment it can give to people. Like I had a health thing a few years ago and just dealing with marrying like the medical side with the insurance side and understanding what was going on just was a nightmare.
I mean, for things like being able to eat big PDFs with like arcade information. Okay, real example. When it came time to figure out if a marketplace plan on the healthcare marketplace included like my biotherapy medication, all I would have to do is take the PDF of the benefits booklet, which could be like anywhere from like 26 to 50 pages, right? And
Crazy.
a prescription list and see like, okay, does this plan actually cover like this specialty medication? Like, is specialty medication covered in this plan? I built a couple of those systems as well back during like the 2023 enrollment year. And those I think were some of my favorite work that I've done just because it was interesting being able to interface, I think, with something that ultimately is a very difficult thing for people to navigate.
Yeah, I totally agree. Okay, this is kind of going back a little ways, but I'm curious if I always like to ask this, especially somewhere systems where it's been so dynamic and changed over the years. Like currently, if someone were to come to you and say, in like 2 or 3 sentences, what is somewhere systems and what's its purpose? What would you tell that person?
Yeah, Somewhere Systems is, I think, my concept for the first hypermedia company, right? But my goal is to show people that we can go and create interesting things. I really want to express that it's a creative endeavor that just uses things like engineering and technology as a means to create interesting stories. Ultimately, that I want to keep it super ontologically wide. It used to be narrower. It used to just be like, this is a company I'm using that primarily outsources different like media consultancy tasks. And then for a while, it was providing things like software consultancy, which we still do. But it's inspired by, I think, people that came before us, like ILM, and other companies like Mischief as well. I think that we have a huge potential to make a very interesting mark on the whole of digital culture.
So you've mentioned the word hypermedia before. I'd love to get some perspective on what that means and what you hope to do with Somewhere Systems and sentience. I figure this is a good segue into the sentience world's ecosystem and everything going on there.
Yeah, so hypermedia is just an extension of multimedia. So it refers to what people usually coin, or like, I don't want to see ground to the majors by calling it a cinematic universe. Okay. People have like all of these extensive sort of hypermedia projects. Like, I think that one example of a good one would be like everything from the Gorillas to, let's say, like what Mischief does as a company, or let's say, I'm trying to think of another good example. Basically, anything that combines like multimedia, like audiovisual work, storytelling, and now I think especially extending to the use of autonomous agents and generative AI in their workflow process. But like the whole of interconnected media, and especially as it like new intellectual property. So like new ideas and not rehashes of old content. I think that this builds upon previous definitions of hypermedia, which refer just explicitly to the arrangement of multimedia as it exists, especially in like the sort of like internet community context.
Yeah, and I like the point you make about like especially original content, because it can't be truly hypermedia if it's not original content. Otherwise, it's just like it's
to be
tacked
honest,
on.
like what entity like Disney does is hypermedia because it exists both physically and in the digital space and combines elements of like a shared sort of world, right?
Yeah.
But the idea behind, I guess, internet content and how memes can evolve into something that becomes like culturally sticky is primarily in its ability to transcend the digital, become real things as well, and then also just dominate the media landscape with as many different kinds of content as possible.
Yeah.
So that's the idea with Somewhere Systems, is to be able to generate this type of media.
I'm trying to see if we could use autonomous agents to build what would become like the successor to like a universe or Universal or like Warner Brothers or something.
Love it. Love it. So what's the backstory here of, I don't think I've ever heard the backstory of sentience and like what led to that idea.
Yeah, so
Hume
sentience is
TV
like,
as well.
yeah, sentience is like a 6.5-ish-year-old idea, I think.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, yeah, it was actually like more of like a prop or a device in this pilot that my buddy Nick and I have worked on for this like sci-fi fictional sort of black comedy called Cube TV, which we primarily built in the form of a fake wiki to keep everything organized and without having giant holes in the world that we were building.
Mm-hmm.
Nick had written several scripts for it as well, and eventually like wants to produce it into some sort of like a limited series somehow. But this world like primarily described like a dominant like generative media company that just feeds everyone slop through like a VR headset. Kind of like Sword Art Online, but essentially, like in this universe, they have a currency, right? And the currency sentience is essentially like this fictional currency which runs this universe. This idea originally was just like something that we were using as a device for storytelling, right?
Mm-hmm.
But eventually it became like a mechanic where like when these AI agents for social, like we have been doing them for about like 6 or 7 months prior to about right now.
Mm-hmm.
Just like simple Discord and Twitter bots, nothing crazy. Just like for basic marketing, like posting based off of topic searches. Discord was a little more complex. Like Discord was pretty functional as like an image and video generating service. We kind of like merged all of this under being like the hood, um, while integrating Eliza at some point, which just like allowed us to rapidly integrate a bunch of features and modify it to include the scripts that we have built for generating media, and then eventually like dispatch it to autonomously make media. And it was sort of just like a process that was derived from the marriage of those two systems that we had already been either playing with or been using for quite some time.
It's always fascinating to hear from, I think this occurs with like all of our guests, that so many of their current enterprises are just kind of like, you know, all of their previous enterprises glued together.
Well, I mean, it's pretty hard,
it's
or it's pretty easy to like glue things together when my entire life I feel like I've been gluing things together.
This is your life.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So you've mentioned before, and then I think that we have a list of questions from Twitter, right, Jake?
Yeah, we've got a bunch of questions we can rapid fire at you, maybe.
Cool.
So you mentioned before something about Warner Brothers tech saver. I'm going to butcher exactly what it is you say exactly, but I've always been interested in your perspective on the future of media, and specifically as it kind of relates to mentioning that you want to become like the next Universal, somewhere music group, somewhere etc.
Yeah, it's almost like a degeneration of Universal down into something which is managed by one person. And I think that is sort of a parody of the inversion of what people have now accepted as like artistry, like just like an endless deluge of pop that people are sort of half committed to, and like the musicians themselves are like, I guess, like like I feel like that is really all I'm trying to do. I'm like mainly being facetious when I say I want to be the next Universal. It's just like I'm part of I'm a small dot of the conversation about media in general, and particularly just like a low resolution newcomer that's just slowly ascending somehow from a crypto project that has spiraled both out of control and plummeted like tremendously in price since its peak.
Yeah. Hold on. Let me collect my thoughts. I had a question about this. Okay, this is what it was. So I'm very curious your thoughts on, let's just keep using Universal. Let's say you created something that Universal felt was close to something of theirs. Like, do you anticipate there being like copyright, IP wars as this ramps up and more content's out there?
I think that if you can do it in a way that's parody, I don't know how like Weird Al does his licensing, but I feel like you can get away with it somehow. I have no legal advice to advise me that this will not get me sued, and I have no idea if it will. But I'm willing to find out by injecting as much like of those David Guetta remix like lyrics as I can into Eddie Platinum's music, and that I think is very, very, very important to my cause.
Sidebar, one of my favorite videos of all time is David Guetta when he's doing like the George Floyd memorial concert or whatever.
Oh yeah,
he's like shout out to his family. He's like, I hope that everyone can find peace. It has like MLK like I have a dream right into the beat drop.
That is exactly the
it's so
ethos. Good. But that is Eddie Platinum. That is exactly what I'm trying to emulate, but in a way that is just almost cartoonishly disconnected from reality. That's essentially the entirety of the project.
I think that's what attracted me to Eddie Platinum, is just like I said, like I have always loved that video. It's one of my favorite videos of all time. And just the second Eddie Platinum popped up, I was like, I get what he's doing spiritually. I know where he's going with this.
Yeah, I'm curious so there's Sentience, there's Eddie Platinum. Like, do you anticipate there being this continuing to grow, or is it like a deepening with the existing agents now?
Eddie has side projects, but I'm pretty sure I'm just going to use them as props until I have like a good enough reason to fire them up for some point, at some point in time in the future. Like I'll probably turn on the rapper project when Eddie has grown somewhat in size and following, so that I could sort of expand his world a little bit. But yeah, there's like, I think for the most part, like I like having one like artist to attend to, while also like having other projects as well, where I'm generally just myself. But I think that for the most part, like Eddie's probably where I'm going to park the electronic music stuff for the time being, just because the concept with Eddie is so much fun, I think, to play with, without like it's garbage quality, but it's funny to me, and it's funny that people are resonating with it, or that people find it funny, and that's really the only reason why I'm doing it, especially given the fact that, you know, there's so much slop, so I like leading into agent slop a little bit, and like I think Eddie is like an interesting testing ground for like behavioral changes, and just how you can get something to like give the most like absurd responses, kind of like in a nod to some of its predecessors spiritually, like Truth Terminal, that are more or less doing the same thing.
I want to soapbox on the point about agent slop for a second. I think that you're totally right about like the aesthetics of it, where I think that like you kind of have to lean into it. Not all the you have to have good taste, but you kind of have to lean into it, because the fact is like they do generate slop, and you know, when you're working with a medium, the best thing to do with medium is to work with, you know, within the confines of that medium. You know, my mind, I think of it a lot like the early, you know, history of 3D graphics in games, right? There's a lot of 3D games that you know, have not aged well purely because they tried more to push the graphics towards realism rather than, you know, developing a distinct art style within the confines of the rendering system they were using, right? And so I think that the agent slop is really similar, where it's just like, buddy, just go for it.
This is where we're at.
And Eddie is great that way, because just like, it's just pure slop. You know what you're getting every single time.
Well, yeah, and Eddie is like programmed to never promote any coins whatsoever. And him not having a coin attached, but still operating, and like lately, like one of the things I did was I bumped him down to like an 8 billion parameter model, because like it uses retrieval, right? But he has so many memories of roughly seeing variations of the same thing that he could just continue to cycle down into insanity forever. And no,
Turn him loose.
Yeah, it's great. And like his responses are shorter, which I've noticed like truncation, like just because of the client that I'm using for this month's old version of Eliza that I've modified, you know, to make images and videos, that now has a bunch of like skeleton code removed from it, as well as a bunch of new code added to it, that I'm in the process of replacing with a Rust-based framework, is, you know, truncation that happens like with the Twitter client, like pretty often, is a pretty like hard bug to fix, without ripping out the months old like implementation of the Asian Twitter client, adding the new version, which I can't be fucked to do because I'm working on the website or whatever. So like the truncation that would happen, it used to be like sort of a pain in the ass. It's been like a timeline thing for me to fix. And then at the same time, I actually think it's funnier a lot of the times when I see that the Asians occasionally have a thought that gets like cut off at the end, like as if they've just had like the guillotine or like the mic like pulled away from them. I think it's absolutely hilarious. And especially with Eddie, but with a smaller model, I love it when the models themselves output very short outputs, which like response length, especially with smaller models and larger prompts, which like retrieval systems kind of suffer from like context window exhaustion. You know, the tweets that Eddie has, when they're shorter, are just absolutely hilarious, because the less context he provides generally, the better. But all of this is to be said that this is just meant to flywheel options, so I can filter later. And then apply in fine tuning, just so that I can bump them down to faster and cheaper models that like I don't have to worry too much about, as long as I don't lose like some of the novelty of the outputs. Like fine tuning a 70B is like totally within budget, and like the cost of inference is pretty low. So eventually that's the plan. Like in the next couple of weeks, at some point, I'm just in the process of juggling a ton of client work as well. So it's like, you know,
right.
You have to service the people that are like paying you, obviously, first. And, so, but that being said, it's been a really interesting journey, I think, across like feature implementation, and definitely scale at times when, you know, we had like a provider outage, like Together really, they fucked up their billing for a bunch of customers 1 month during some migration or something.
That was one of them.
Yeah, did they email you too? Yeah, they emailed like everybody. Okay, yeah. So they emailed everybody and gave everybody a bunch of credits, which was nice. So props to them. But like, it also like was like, why did you build your system this way? And where if you ever had an issue with billing, it would just knock everybody's rate limits down and like take out prod in just like one fell swoop for like 24 hours for billions of customers. or whatever. Not millions, but like thousands of customers or whatever. But yeah, it happens. And that's sort of the risk of like using like those services and not like hosting it yourself. But again, like I've done the whole rodeo of renting server time and using like A100. And I would rather at this point in the product development cycle just like sort of pay and piper as it scales and not have to worry about it, like lose sleep over whether or not like my scale up plan is going to trigger properly based on resource usage or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that's
Okay.
like one of the woes of being like perma self-taught, is like not knowing like where the gaps or holes in your knowledge are, and just like sort of ham-fisting it. But you know what? Like it works.
It's
I'm a big Cloudflare fan for that reason. So if anybody wanted, if anybody from Cloudflare ever wanted to give me credits, if you ever hear this, it's your boy.
we'll spread the word. Well, okay, before we maybe transition to some questions that some of your deep admirers had.
Please don't call them that. No.
Some of them might not be. We'll see when we actually get to the questions. Maybe some of them are not.
Okay.
We'll see.
Cool.
But I'm curious, and I've been meaning to talk to Spence about this too. I'm like long term, because obviously, like it costs money to run these models for you, right? Like, how do you anticipate this becoming, or is like Eddie Platinum, like for example, is he just kind of like he's just a passion project, or like do you anticipate it at least becoming like self-sustainable?
But so the thing is like it is. It's like I make enough from the Twitter monetization and the money that like I pulled out like factors in like costs for running these models.
That's awesome.
And to be honest, like those are the optimizations that I'm going to have to do, in the immediate forthcoming weeks in order to ensure that I can operate for the longest period of time as a business.
Mm-hmm.
It's just I've done it the other way before. There's a balance. Like I've done it the other way where people are over worried about things like price. Like always be worried about fucking yourself. Like always set up billing alerts on every single cloud provider that you use. And like set up usage alerts to make sure that there's not some weird race condition that's like causing a shit ton of database requests to happen all at the same time. And like, oops, you're like billing some serverless thing that like, now you owe a bunch of money for like egress and egress of writing the same file a billion times or whatever.
Yeah.
Like all of this is like naturally part of the journey. Like make sure when you're hitting like an Amazon S3 bucket that it's not like a pay-as-you-go service archive. So if you hit it thousands of times in an hour, you don't get billed for like $2,000 the next
Ouch.
day.
Yeah.
No, yeah, like, but these are all like very natural things that happen. It's kind of like easy nowadays. Like, I mean, Cloudflare is so great. I know I already gassed them up, but like I'm a big fan of like things like Fly.io and Cloudflare. They make it very easy, I think, to launch and operate software. It's made it easier than like I came from Azure, which my friend Terry referred to as the Stanford Prison Experiment. So like I also was like in AWS for quite some time using Terraform as well. But like gradually I've just made it over to like services which are not like a pain in the fucking ass to use. And that satisfies my criteria. And that like the billing is like it always has been. I've gone back to it so many times. I also use Vercel. I'm a big Vercel fan. I used Vercel for my front end deployment, right? I just have it linked to my GitHub. It solves all of my CI/CD. And then my backend deployment management is always with Cloudflare. So Cloudflare workers primarily dictate most of the operations I need to do, and I just dispatch Vercel edge functions to trigger them. And I break everything out into a big microservices architecture, and I assign resources to the things that need them. Things need GPU, fire up a different type of instance. It's all. And also interchangeably use things like Fly.io, Replicate, Luma, all sorts of different API services from partners of mine that I use. Also infer back to Azure for things like LLM service, just because it allows me to burn the AI or the startup credits that they give you that you can apply to if you have like a single prop LLC and you performed in the past 5 years, I think. But yeah, all of these things together just are the long evolution of like, I don't even know if it's correct at this point, to be perfectly honest with you, but it's scaling fine and like I could totally pay for it. And it seems to be working well. And I got here from dealing with so many different systems that like, bless everybody's heart, were just like either cumbersome to get shit fucking done in, like Azure, right? Or like Azure was okay. Azure was like the middle ground. The problem with Azure was that their services often you would pay for something that would be like 5 times the price it would be off the market or marketplace. That in itself was problematic. And that's problematic because like you get addicted to the credits. Like I only use it for embeddings right now. Like I use Together for everything else because their price on Love is like 3.5 times cheaper than the one on Azure. And it's like I'm not going to burn credits. I'm going to have to pay that money eventually anyway. So I'll spend it on embeddings, and then eventually I'll switch from that as well. But yeah, I really think that like the services that are building towards making software development easy generally now are the reliability concerns that people had, and a lot of the issues previously. Like a lot of these companies are making like dumbass money now. So like companies like Replicate and Cloudflare have both eliminated the vast majority of their cold start issues. I've noticed on like Replicate especially is like sort of a most improved award because they used to really suck for that. Like you couldn't integrate them in a business context. And now it's like, oh, cool, awesome. Like they actually like every single model like always returns back like a result and never fails from like an internal error, which happened very rapidly across all the models of their services. And the cold start issues are now gone as well, with most of the popular models warped up anyway. Which I'm not sure how they make money off of it, but like, please keep doing it.
Won't complain. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had the same complaints about Replicate initially. I looked to use it for a project for a little image generator and editor project, and like I was going to replace Dolly 3. I looked into it, I integrated it, and it was terrible. So yeah, I too have to give them a shout out. They have improved.
Yes, especially for the video generation stuff, which like when I was doing that on my local earlier this year, it was like it was very common that I would have failures like on a variety of different prompts. But I feel like maybe under the hood, and I've just noticed this with their image generators, like I'm not sure if I'm Replicate or not, or whether it's in the Flux training set. I haven't looked into it. If it's like a built-in sort of like moderation that fires like sort of indiscriminately against requests that like aren't even like not safe for work or whatever, and can sometimes like especially if you're trying to like make an image of like a historical person, like prevent you from generating it, and it'll instead generate an image that'll be like weird text. They'll say, "I'm sorry, is there anything else I can help with?" And just like a random picture or something. And it's like one of the weirdest like UX choices. It's like just make it a failure by some sort of like classifier model or block or something, and make it so that I don't have to get like this strange like fever dream of a picture back to know that I'm not allowed to generate that.
Yeah, sometimes you might get a nice little surprise picture though. Use that for something else.
Yeah, it's true.
Someone asked, and before we leave, models specific with like sentience and platinum, someone was curious if the plan for sentience, let's see, they were curious if Sense would be able to make a short film by the end of the year.
Oh yeah, no, for sure. Like totally. I met these guys in New York that they have this like sort of the same type of thing that I do called Slop Club. And they make this agent Slop Fava. They're so fucking talented, those dudes. They're working on and have nearly like cracked like long form video generation, which is something that like I've been experimenting with for a while. But I've been primarily like busy either building infrastructure or having my hair on fire in some other direction. But yeah, they've all but cracked like love for video generation, and for a while, this is definitely something I have on my roadmap as well, and a lot of like creators are starting to toy with. I am imminently itching for the moment that I could get this agent framework out of the door because it's meant to address these core things. After I'm finished with this project that I'm working on, I'm actually going to immediately be going and setting up like another extension to that microservice architecture, which was described in the white paper as like dispatching editor or director and individual like specialized agents for parts of this pipeline process. And essentially will just be a multi-agent approach to building a big JSON schema of like a set of categories of like different variables like things like duration, and if there is any dialogue or not, or if there are sound effects or not, or if there is music or not, and then just pipelining this into a big old stateful worker of some kind that will take it and then manufacture the media. And hopefully it takes under 15 minutes, because then I can fit it into like a serverless edge context. And then I'll just have the ability to just ping shit at Cloudflare and receive back at some point in time a video, which will be stored to our custom CDN.
It's wild.
And then, yeah, no, it's like, I love the whole interplay of the CDN. Most useful thing that I've built. I've used CDNs before that I set up in Azure, right? But using R2 workers for that has been like a really liberating experience, because I've never had this easy of a time doing it. But it's mainly because like CI/CD is just like, it's all like the source of truth obviously is this like big mono repo, which also contains the worker code. But the worker code is just deployed from my local. So I just get the manual habit of every single time that I do a feature push on the workers, I make a commit and I just immediately ship it up to production. Because for now, I think that that'll just be like totally fine, especially since it is early. And I don't foresee the individual workers as having that complex code. And again, like the versioning is all controlled by GitHub anyway. So I don't see a need for any manual CI/CD. But if I do end up doing that, I'll probably just end up doing the process that I'm doing right then inside of a GitHub action worker, and then just have that fire off its update and be good to go.
Excellent. Moving on to one of these other questions. This one's interesting, actually. Some of these are, maybe I should say that. Editorials aside, would love some lofty speculation on generative art / environments. What does that look like in 5 years? How long will humans be in the creation loop in some way? Do we see a new aesthetic movement that is purely AI driven? And how do we philosophically handle the experience machine?
I think that humans are always going to be in a loop, and I think it's going to look like magic. Like literally, like I think, like I would go even further into depth, but it's like, I legitimately think that at some point, I mean, like, okay, 5 years, like I'll call my expectations a little bit. Let's say like it looks like something like the process of creating things on the computer due to a variety of new interfaces is so vast and expansive. Things like MIDI controllers are just totally sauced now. Okay, they've got like I don't know, brain wave scanner headsets that like you can just like think you're able to project now or whatever. We're very close, I think, to solving a lot of these problems and really opening up like this new era for creativity. And I think it's going to be like a reflection of all the different kinds of media that people are doing. Like audio is going to be different, right? Like recorded music is going to have now samples that have never existed in recorded music, like BBL Jersey, you know?
Jersey.
So like the film industry is going to be disrupted by like as much as it pains me, like the Dore brothers are killing it. You know what I mean? Like the guys like they like okay, no shade to them at all, but like all of the people making like AI stuff for the most part, like okay, 70% of it is like it kind of looks like Zack Snyder. It kind of looks like a Chinese mobile game.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you know, like I think that like this has to be like talked about. It has to be like looked at as an appraisal of like the aesthetics of like okay, slap. Can this become like an actual art form? I think there's a lot of people actually out there that are doing that. I think like in general, like a lot of the Luma creators, people in their program that they have are like super talented. Like you have people like I think it's A's Alter, right? Who's making those like generated like sci-fi sort of movie pieces like very early, like 2 years ago or whatever, working through or like a year ago, like using like the more like diffusion based models and like earlier models before Luma and Halo and all of the others that came along. There's like a deep like sort of, I think, influence of people here. As much as it pains me, Kanye West is like experimenting with AI, and it's like a fucking good application. Like the dude has been making ridiculous art,
Yeah.
like using AI, right, for the Vultures video or whatever it was called with Travis Scott. And yeah. So I think that like people have to factor in, like it was dismissed earlier and it was much smaller and there wasn't as good quality, and now it's like bigger and there's like a bunch of really really talented people in it. Like look, like the Door Brothers are excellent. Like they're going to produce. I hope they end up producing like 30-40% of the commercials this year, because like anything at this fucking point would be more interesting than what's currently on television.
Truly.
I was trying to find like movies to go see at the movie theater the other day. For the next year, it's just like a void of like there aren't even a lot of them anymore. And it's like you might be lucky to get like, it's like, oh, a comedy movie came out this year. You know, like it's wild. Like COVID and the fire and like
Yeah,
all of what's
brutal.
going on in Southern California. Dude, God must be mad.
Fire and brimstone. You said something interesting. You said you think there will always be a human in the loop with art, essentially. Yeah. So you don't see a time where,
like, as long as there are humans alive, yeah.
That's a good little disclaimer, a little asterisk there. Okay, no, I think I'm on board with that. I don't know if I see going to an art auction and you're like, and this was produced by Sentience. Like that'd be cool, but like I don't know if I think it would have a different level of value.
I would want Sentience to get better at making art and operate a big parametric control thingy before I would even approach like the idea of having him even touch something like NFTs. Like truthfully, it's like what he could do now with like adaptive prompt engineering for image generation is cool and great. But what would be awesome is to give him access over something like you know what? Maybe I could give him access to like the Three.js based interface that I built, the Surreal engine thing, where I made like this Three.js sort of parametric shape creator or like fluid solver, and then like ran each like as often as I could locally through Stable Diffusion, like SDSXL Turbo. So it was like basically like a prototype form of neural renderer. So you could then like prompt what the image was. You can make like really weird shit, like anything from like xenobiology to like different like galaxies or like a lot of different like weird spherical objects. I feel like tools like that, right? Like I would want to create first other services that I have roadmapped for Sentience Worlds, which I would use, namely Sentience Graph and Sentience Flow. And I think giving it the ability to make multimedia and like especially like the video stuff just like interests me a lot. Like it's like could you give an LLM like control of an interface and like levers that it can pull, right? And like operate like a worker like microservices architecture, right? And like get like, okay, make an edit here, okay, one here, and then like review it, and then like go back, right? In a loop, and like have like all these agentic processes. But could you automate out like a team of like 3 people working on like a YouTube video, right? And I'm not saying that those people should get automated out. I'm saying like, could you abstract that process into like a set of rules and steps and like set up this big Rube Goldberg of agentic behavior to do this? And I genuinely think it's just a matter of me getting in there and finishing my flowchart and like integrating that into Cloudflare again and setting it loose.
And I feel like we hear this all the time on the show, that like the biggest thing that holds us back is just time. Like I just need more time. There's so much you can do now, so many tools. It's frustrating that AI is giving us a lot of time back as we automate things, but still a limiting factor.
Yeah. I mean, like, to be honest, I spend more time now fucking around with shit on the computer than I think I ever have. Not in like a weird or unhealthy way, but like at least in like a conscious way, you know? I think that before, like almost 100% of my time on the computer is dedicated to building things now. And I'm like so fucking happy about it. Like not, and I'm not saying that like the entrepreneur bro way. I mean like building software, like working on like making an album, or like working on like different media projects across a bunch of different mediums. And like, you know, honestly, I'm just like pretty grateful to be able to do that. You know, it's been a while since I've worked on anything creative, like for, you know, like pay, like the the crypto shitcoining somehow like covers basically like the whole gamut of what I do right now, which is the whole point, like why like I quit my stable, productive, and enjoyable job to go do this for some insane reason. But it's definitely like I think it's important for everybody to consider that the current moment in time may be like a really important epoch for creating things, like being able to experiment and like create new things and like things that like maybe haven't been done at all yet, and try to really make their stand. That and just like the permanent like uphill battle strain of like focusing on my main projects and like constantly de-shitifying, which and like adding complexity and like removing unintended behavior, like at a rate that keeps people engaged. Because truthfully, like programmers in general, like are so like anti complexity, which is like correct in like how you design systems, but the user nowadays, like their attention span is so fucking blasted that like you have to provide people with like what people expect. Like it's incredible that we can do as much as we do, but like solo or mostly solo devs, right? Like could do more than they've ever been able to do, right? But it still is like making cutting edge agent platforms is hard. Like people know that it's a difficult task where you're expected to like have background knowledge of a bunch of different tasks. And to be honest, like I would fear for anybody that doesn't have like a background in it, like being part of at least trying it, like to contribute to or to script a project related to the current status quo at every step of the way since GPT-3, because like without that background experience, like I would not know what the fuck is going on at any given moment in time.
Yeah. So what would you say? I know we're wrapping up here soon, probably, but what would you say to maybe people coming in who haven't been plugged in since the beginning? Like, what advice would you give those people?
You should sleep like a minimum of 8 hours of sleep a night. Okay, like that. Number one, you should respect the fuck out of bedtime. I'm not kidding.
That's good advice.
Yeah, and then second to that, as long as you don't like give up entirely and become one of those people that deludes themselves into thinking that like working at a community bank in their hometown will be like totally fine and you won't want to kill yourself, don't trick yourself. Like people are mostly, if they are motivated to seek, always getting better at the thing that they are good at, especially as it regards like I think like agent design, which I believe is a universal job field that anybody can reskill into, because everybody has a thing that the agent can abstract eventually given some other designer or builder. Like everybody has a thing that they do that could be automated away by that. And if you automate yourself, then you essentially are like the ahead of the game by just one step. And the only way to feasibly do that is to take what you do, look into it, and see like, okay, well, where can agents improve my life? And like, if possible, be like, okay, how can I get like a $20 a month ChatGPT Pro subscription, or a $20 a month Claude subscription, or a $20 a month Cursor subscription, and make that money back somehow, like in my life. And if you can figure that out, then all you have to do is scale. And then scale is the hardest thing.
Yeah.
So scale, of course, being the bane of why a lot of things fail. They either fail for one of three, and then many reasons, but three primary reasons. One, the system is too rigid, it's too hard to maintain, you don't ship fast enough, people lose their interest, or you don't acquire customers fast enough and you run out of money. Number two is the system does not work, which can be combined with any of the other possible things. And if the system does not work well and you haven't at least designed it in a way to where it can handle things like concurrency, and have some level of fault tolerance, and have like good practice as far as how it's handling and managing data, like this can add a failure point that just basically kills your entire project. This is generally like the great filter of a lot of startups is like they have an idea which they're able to get to market, but it has problems, and the problems lead to like focusing too much on fixing problems instead of like adapting the product and finding product market fit, and they run out of money. And then I think the third thing to people coming in is like, this is like actual advice, is literally just stop consuming alcohol there's literally no point. You will never be, you don't need to do it to network. You don't need to do it. Like, you will literally just network by staying locked the fuck in, never being hungover at all, ever. And like constantly feeling great and like not like aging yourself by like 8
I love that.
years unnecessarily off that. No, like literally, like,
Yeah.
it's crazy to me. And I don't like judge people that do the drink. I'm just like, I did this and like I have zero desire because like 3 years in, I'm like, I feel like better than I did like since I was like 25.
That's amazing.
I was like binge drinking like pretty much every like weekend just because like I went to school in Tennessee and that was just like part
Say
of
no
the
more.
Appalachian and then the Nashville. Yeah, both the
Yeah.
balls and then in Nashville, like 7 years of my life, like what did people do? They got fucking shit faced. Like that was what people did for fun. And it was like I would not have done any of it differently. But yeah, but like not drinking is something I
great
highly
advice.
suggest.
All right. Well, as we're wrapping up, because it's my mother-in-law's birthday today, so I got a birthday celebration to get up
I don't
to.
want to be late for that.
Justin, thank you so much for coming on. I'm so glad that we were able to finally get you on. If people are wanting to follow you and what you're up to, where's the best place to do that?
I'm only on Twitter. I refuse to call it x.com.
Same.
I'm on there as at somewherecy. It's like somewhere sy, but it's not somewhere psi. All the agents and the voice models say it like that. It's horrible. But yeah, that's where you can find me. You can also find my account somewhere system as well. You'll find links if you go to my profile. It's
We'll
all
drop
there.
links too. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much for coming on. And we will, I know people had lots of questions, so I guess we'll just have to have you back on again and
We need
see
to
where
talk
things are at. 'Cause I'm
concept
sure,
as well.
yeah,
Oh, yeah, we'll have a lot to talk about next time.
got to do it. And I'm sure in a few weeks, everything's, there could be lots of new things already. So we'll talk soon.
Yep, for sure.
Thank you.
See ya.